The sirens began before dawn. Their hollow wail rolled across the cliffs of Dover, echoing through empty streets and over the grey waters of the Channel. The sky, once pale and harmless, was now streaked with the red glow of distant fires. Lieutenant Thomas Reeves tightened the strap of his flight helmet and looked up. The clouds above were bruised and heavy, the kind that promised rain, or blood. On the airfield below, ground crews moved like ghosts through fog. Mechanics barked orders, refueling Hurricanes and Spitfires, their hands blackened with oil and soot. The smell of petrol hung thick in the air, mingled with salt and smoke from the night's bombing. Reeves's plane still bore the scars of the last sortie, holes in the fuselage patched hastily with sheet metal. He tried not to think about the men who hadn't come back. "Reeves," someone shouted. It was Sergeant Harris, his wingman and closest friend since training. Harris's grin was weary but defiant. "You ready to dance again?" Reeves forced a smirk. "Always. Long as the music keeps playing." Harris laughed, though it came out more like a cough. Both men turned as the sound of approaching boots cut through the noise. General Arthur Kellen stepped out of the morning mist, coat flaring in the wind. His presence drew silence like gravity. The men whispered about him, the mad general, the strategist who ignored orders, who gambled with lives. Reeves had never spoken to him directly, but his voice on the radio had become impossible to forget. Calm. Commanding. Cold. Kellen's eyes were sharp and restless, always scanning the horizon as if he could see the enemy before radar could. He carried no papers, no visible insignia of rank beyond the faint glint on his collar. He stopped near the two pilots, hands behind his back. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "today we bleed the enemy's arrogance." Harris swallowed. "Sir, we're running short on fuel and replacements. Command wants us defensive over London." Kellen cut him off with a look. "Command doesn't see what I see. The Luftwaffe expects us to defend. They want to draw us into the open, exhaust us in daylight. We'll do the opposite. We'll let them come. Then we strike where they least expect, at their strength." Reeves frowned. "Sir, if we pull back, won't that leave the coast exposed?" Kellen's gaze lingered on him. "Exposure," he said softly, "is a weapon, if you make the enemy believe its weakness. Let them dive for the kill. Then we turn the sky into their grave." The general turned, walking toward the command tent. Reeves watched him go, unease stirring in his chest. Around him, men were already muttering, half in awe, half in fear. "He's lost it," one mechanic whispered. "You don't fight the Germans by hiding." Another replied, "Tell that to the ones who didn't hide and burned for it." Reeves said nothing. He climbed into his plane, the cockpit cold and claustrophobic. The smell of leather and metal filled his lungs. For a moment, he stared at the photo taped to his dashboard, a woman smiling in sunlight that no longer existed. He touched it once, then flicked on the ignition. Engines thundered to life across the field. One by one, the planes taxied forward, slicing through fog as the first rays of dawn broke across the channel. The radio crackled with Kellen's voice. "All squadrons, hold altitude until my mark. Do not engage until ordered. I repeat, do not engage." It felt wrong. Every instinct in Reeves screamed to meet the enemy head-on. But he followed. Orders were orders. They climbed into the open sky, engines humming steady. Below, the sea glittered cold and endless. Ahead, the enemy came. Dozens of black dots emerged on the horizon, growing larger by the second. Bombers. He counted 20, 30, more behind them. A swarm of Messerschmitts guarding the formation like wolves. The air crackled with tension. Harris's voice came through the headset, barely steady. "Bloody hell, Tom. That's half the Luftwaffe." Reeves's palms were slick inside his gloves. "We hold, Sergeant." Kellen's voice cut in again, steady as stone. Wait for them to commit. Wait for the dive. The German formation roared closer, sunlight flashing off metal wings. Reeves could see the bombs slung under their bellies now, black shapes ready to fall. The first sirens on the coast began again, faint even at this height. "General, they're over the line," Harris shouted. "Not yet," Kellen replied. "Let them believe we've broken." Reeves felt his breath shorten. The first bombs fell, distant flashes along the cliffs. Smoke rose where the sea met land. "Sir, they're bombing our supply lines." "Hold." Then the order came, a whisper that cut like a blade, "Now." The sky erupted. Reeves banked hard left, plunging into the German flank. Machine guns spat light. The air filled with the screech of engines and the staccato rattle of gunfire. He caught one bomber in his sights, fired, and watched its left wing shear off. The explosion painted the clouds orange. "Good hit, 2-1. Harris shouted. Then static. A moment later, screaming metal. Reeves turned just in time to see Harris's plane spiraling down, smoke trailing like a ribbon. "Harris! Pull up!" No response. The radio hissed, "Empty." The plane struck the water and vanished in a burst of foam. Reeves felt his stomach twist, but there was no time to grieve. A Messerschmitt dove past him, guns blazing. He rolled instinctively, bullets shredding the air where he'd been seconds before. His canopy cracked, a shard of glass sliced across his cheek. He tasted blood and salt. "Stay focused," Kellen's voice said, low and unwavering. "Every second you survive, another German burns his fuel." Reeves gritted his teeth and climbed, chasing the enemy into sunlight. 2 Spitfires joined his wing, firing in unison. The German pilot panicked, broke formation, and was caught in their crossfire. Flames consumed the cockpit. The wreck spun down in a silent arc. After 10 minutes, the Luftwaffe began to falter. Their bombers turned back toward France, escorted by what fighters remained. Kellen's squadrons, battered and bloodied, regrouped high above the coast. Smoke curled from several engines. Only half of them remained airborne. "Base to command," Kellen radioed. "Enemy retreating. Estimated losses, 40% of their formation." "Your own losses," came the static reply. Kellen paused. His eyes flicked to the horizon, where parachutes floated like white tears over the sea. "Acceptable." The line went dead. Reeves didn't know whether to feel pride or sickness. He looked down at the channel, searching for Harris's parachute, but found only broken waves and drifting debris. They returned to base under a bruised sky. The airfield was quieter now. Medics carried stretchers past burning hangars. A mechanic sat beside a crater, staring at the twisted remains of a plane as if it were a grave. Reeves climbed out of his cockpit, every muscle trembling. Kellen was already there, coat unbuttoned, eyes far away. A shell had torn a hole through one of the hangar roofs, sunlight spilling in like gold over ash. Reeves approached him slowly. "Sir, we lost Harris. And most of Red Squadron." Kellen nodded once. "I know. With respect, sir, we can't keep this up. If we fight like this every day, there'll be no one left to fly." The general turned to face him fully. For a moment, the mask of command cracked, just slightly. "You think I don't know their names?" he said, voice quiet but fierce. "You think I don't count every man who doesn't return?" He stepped closer, eyes burning. "But if I let grief dictate strategy, then we lose everything. Our cities. Our children. The very air we breathe. I won't allow that." Reeves held his gaze, then looked away. The wind carried the faint sound of church bells from the town below, muffled by smoke. Kellen's tone softened. This isn't courage, Lieutenant. It's endurance. Remember that. That night, the pilots gathered in the mess hall. Silence hung over the room. Cups of tea went untouched. Someone began to hum softly, a tune from before the war, but it faltered halfway through. Reeves sat alone by the window, staring out at the darkness. Every so often, the horizon flickered with light from distant raids. He opened his logbook, the pages stained with oil and sweat. Under the date, he wrote, "The sky burned red today. We flew into it anyway." He paused, pen hovering. Then added, "General Kellen says we fight ghosts. Maybe he's right. Maybe we've become them." Outside, the rain began, soft, steady, cleansing nothing. Kellen stood alone by the runway, the storm soaking through his uniform. He held a crumpled telegram in one hand, a report from command, criticizing his deviation from orders. He didn't read it again. His eyes were fixed on the sea, invisible beyond the rain. He whispered something only the wind could hear, "They'll call it madness. Let them." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, half shadow, half resolve. Somewhere behind him, Reeves closed his logbook and blew out the lantern. The base fell into darkness, save for the dim red glow of smoldering wrecks. Tomorrow, the enemy would return. Tomorrow, they would rise again to meet them. For now, only the rain remained, falling softly over the ruins, washing the blood from the runway, whispering through the night like the quiet breath of the dead. And far above, the clouds glowed faintly, as if the sky itself still remembered the fire. The morning after the battle dawned gray and windless, the kind of silence that felt heavier than noise. The airfield lay scarred, burned hangars, shattered glass, the scent of smoke clinging to the damp grass. Lieutenant Thomas Reeves woke to the sound of boots crunching gravel and engines sputtering to life. His sleep had been shallow, filled with the echoes of machine guns and Harris's final scream cutting through the static. Outside, the surviving pilots moved like sleepwalkers. Some laughed too loudly, others didn't speak at all. The illusion of victory had already begun to rot. Reeves washed his face in cold water from a metal basin, the sting of it grounding him for a moment. He looked at his reflection, eyes sunken, a cut healing along his cheek, and wondered when he had begun to look older than his years. General Arthur Kellen was in the operations tent, maps and flight plans spread before him like pieces of an unsolvable puzzle. His hand moved slowly across the chart, tracing invisible lines between airfields, radar stations, and coastlines. To an untrained eye, it was chaos. To Kellen, it was the shape of survival. Reeves entered quietly. The general didn't look up. "How many aircraft can fly?" 13, sir. Of 22. Kellen's jaw tightened. And pilots? 10 confirmed ready. 2 injured, 1 missing. Reeves hesitated. Still no word from Harris. The pause stretched long. Finally, Kellen said, he knew the risks. Reeves almost replied, almost, but stopped himself. Arguing with Kellen was like throwing stones at a cliff, it only reminded you how small you were. Instead, the lieutenant stepped closer to the map. "Sir, command wants us to defend the London corridor. They say the next wave will target the industrial district." Kellen gave a faint, humorless smile. "Command wants to die with honor. I intend to live with strategy." He tapped the map. "We abandon static defense. We scatter our squadrons, small units, fast movement. We strike, then vanish before they can retaliate." "Vanishing squadrons," Reeves murmured, almost to himself. Kellen nodded. "Precisely. We make them chase ghosts until their fuel tanks are dry and their nerves are cracked. We'll bleed them, not break them." "Not yet." "Sir," Reeves said carefully, "the men are exhausted. They need clarity. Not more mystery." Kellen finally looked at him. His eyes were bloodshot, but still sharp. Clarity gets you killed, Lieutenant. Unpredictability wins wars. That afternoon, they flew. The sky above the channel was deceptively calm, blue streaked with white, as if the heavens had forgotten yesterday's carnage. Reeves led his section through low cloud cover, engines humming steady. Their orders were simple: strike a bomber convoy, then retreat without engaging pursuit. As they neared the target, the distant glint of German aircraft appeared. Reeves's pulse quickened. He could see the black crosses on the wings, the shimmering heat from exhaust trails. "Squadron, form on me," he ordered. Kellen's voice came through the radio from the command bunker miles away. "Remember, speed over glory. Strike, fade, and live to strike again." Reeves dove. The air screamed around his cockpit. Tracers flashed past like fiery rain. He squeezed the trigger, watched a bomber's left engine explode, the craft rolling into a spiral of smoke and flame. Then, before the escort fighters could close in, he banked sharply and climbed back into cloud cover. The Germans followed, but they chased phantoms. Below, more British fighters struck from hidden altitudes, then disappeared into the mist. No pattern, no rhythm. Chaos. Radios crackled with confusion, German voices cursing, calling for formation. Their perfect order was unraveling. By the time the last RAF plane slipped back toward the coast, the sea below was littered with wreckage. Reeves exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Back on base, the tension that had haunted the men began to shift. There was pride now, quiet, cautious pride. For once, they had drawn blood and survived. Reeves sat on a crate outside the hangar, watching mechanics patch bullet holes in his wings. "Madness, one of them muttered. "Maybe the old man's got something after all." Reeves didn't answer. He looked toward the command tent where Kellen stood alone, reading reports. The general's silhouette seemed smaller than before, somehow thinner beneath the dim light. Victory had never looked so fragile. 2 nights later, the war came to them. A low rumble woke Reeves before dawn. The base was plunged into chaos, sirens, shouting, boots thundering through mud. The Luftwaffe had found them. Searchlights cut through the darkness as the first bombs fell, detonating with concussive force that sent debris spiraling into the air. Reeves ran, ducking behind sandbags as fire rolled across the runway. "Kellen! Where's Kellen?" someone yelled. Through the smoke, Reeves saw the general emerge from the operations tent, clutching a briefcase and shouting orders over the noise. "Get the planes out. Scatter them, now." A blast threw him to the ground. The tent collapsed behind him, flames curling along the canvas. Reeves rushed forward, pulling the older man up by the arm. Kellen's face was streaked with soot, eyes wild but focused. "Forget the base," he gasped. "The plan's in here." He lifted the briefcase. "The Ghost Wing strategy. It's all that matters." Together they stumbled toward the surviving aircraft. Bombs fell closer now, shaking the ground like the heartbeat of the world ending. Reeves helped the general into a jeep, shouting for the driver to take him north to the secondary airfield. Then he turned back toward the chaos. One hangar was burning, but inside he could hear screams. Reeves ran through the flames, heat searing his flight suit, and dragged 2 mechanics from the wreckage. One was unconscious, the other sobbing, skin blistered. He didn't stop until both were clear. When the final explosion hit, it lit the horizon orange, scattering embers like falling stars. The base was gone. By morning, the surviving squadrons regrouped at a remote field miles inland. The men were blackened with soot, eyes hollow, uniforms torn. Yet Kellen stood before them as if nothing could break his composure. "This," he said, voice hoarse but steady, "is what the enemy calls victory. They think we're finished. Let them. From now on, we move like smoke. No base, no pattern, no comfort. We fight from nowhere, and we'll make them fear the empty sky." The pilots exchanged uneasy glances. Reeves saw exhaustion in every face. Still, no one argued. What else could they do? There was nowhere left to fall back to. Over the next weeks, Kellen's strategy unfolded like a dark miracle. His squadrons stopped defending fixed targets. They operated from improvised airstrips, fields, beaches, even abandoned roads. Civilians smuggled fuel in milk trucks, local farmers hid spare parts in barns. The Germans bombed empty runways, expecting retaliation that never came. And when they relaxed, thinking the RAF beaten, the ghost wing struck again, swift, surgical, devastating. Reeves became one of Kellen's most trusted flight leaders. He stopped sleeping properly, stopped counting missions. His journal turned sparse, reduced to fragments. Cloud cover today. Hit supply convoy near Calais. 4 down. 1 missing. Harris's name erased from board. Feels wrong. General says ghosts don't need graves. The men started calling themselves that, the Ghost Wings. It was half joke, half prayer. When they painted pale white streaks on their fuselages for identification, it looked like phantom marks slashing through the sky. But ghosts still bled. During a dawn sortie over the channel, Reeves's squadron was ambushed. The trap was brutal, 40 Messerschmitts against 10 RAF fighters. The sky turned to fire. Reeves dove through the chaos, engines howling. He downed one enemy, then another, but 2 of his men were hit. He saw one parachute flare open, only to catch fire mid-descent. "Pull back," he yelled. "All units disengage." Static swallowed the reply. He banked low, skimming the sea, salt spray blinding him as tracer rounds cut through the mist. One grazed his wing, tearing fabric. Another shattered the mirror above his head. For a moment, he thought it was over, then the radio crackled with Kellen's voice. "North by northwest, Reeves. There's cover in the clouds. Don't die for pride." Reeves obeyed. He burst through the fog, heart hammering, and climbed until the ocean was only memory beneath him. When the signal cleared, he realized only 3 planes followed. 3 ghosts left. That night, Kellen gathered the survivors. No speeches this time. He simply poured a measure of whiskey into a tin cup and passed it around. When it reached Reeves, the liquid shook in his hand. "Sir," he said quietly, "how many ghosts until the world forgets we were ever real?" Kellen met his gaze. "Enough to haunt them forever." Outside, thunder rolled. Or maybe it was artillery in the distance. The rain came soon after, hissing softly over the tents. Reeves lay awake listening to it, thinking of Harris, of the men lost to the sea, of the endless sky that demanded everything and returned nothing. At dawn, the radar officer burst in, breathless. "Sir, major movement detected, hundreds of enemy aircraft heading for London." Kellen straightened, every trace of weariness erased. "So it begins," he murmured. "Their last gamble." He looked out toward the horizon, where the first light of day touched the clouds. "Tell the men to prepare. The Luftwaffe thinks we've vanished. Let's remind them we were never gone." Reeves felt a chill run through him. Around the camp, engines began to roar, shaking the earth awake. The pilots moved with grim purpose, no laughter now, no talk of ghosts. Just silence and resolve. As he climbed into his cockpit, Reeves glanced back toward Kellen standing by the runway, coat whipping in the wind. The general looked older than he ever had, yet his posture was unbroken, defiant against the gray sky. Reeves saluted once before the canopy closed. When the planes lifted off, the ground disappeared beneath a rising wall of mist. Ahead, the sun was a pale disk behind clouds, and somewhere beyond that light waited the enemy. The radio clicked, Kellen's voice calm as ever. "This is it, gentlemen. Let's end their hunt." Then the line went silent, and the squadrons vanished once more into the endless blue. The wind carried the scent of rain and metal as the dawn broke over the makeshift airfield. A thin fog drifted across the runway, curling around the wings of the waiting fighters like ghostly fingers reluctant to let them go. Reeves stood beside his aircraft, fastening his gloves, his breath visible in the cold air. The engines around him coughed to life one by one, each roar merging into a chorus of defiance. In the distance, General Kellen watched from a small rise, binoculars raised, his face drawn but resolute. The night's reports lay scattered on a folding table behind him, each marked with the same grim truth: the Luftwaffe was coming in full force. The largest wave yet, hundreds of bombers, escorted by fighters, sweeping toward London. This was the reckoning he had predicted, and the trap he had prepared to spring. Reeves climbed into the cockpit, the leather of his gloves creaking as he gripped the controls. His reflection in the glass canopy looked alien, eyes too hard, jaw too tight. He thought of Harris for the first time in days, not as a corpse sinking into the channel but as the friend who once joked that they'd live forever. Reeves swallowed the ache. Living forever was no longer the goal. Living through this day would have to suffice. The radio hissed. Kellen's voice came through, steady and unyielding. "All squadrons, this is it. They've thrown everything they have. Hold formation until the signal. Let them overextend. Today, we make the sky theirs no longer." "Copy that," Reeves replied. He glanced at the sky above, an endless dome of gray, waiting to ignite. Moments later, radar confirmed it, a vast shadow moving in from the southeast, black dots swelling across the horizon like a storm front. Reeves's stomach turned. It was one thing to fight a dozen planes. This was a swarm. "Jesus," murmured one pilot over the channel. "There's too many." Kellen's voice cut through the fear. "There are never too many. There are only targets." Then came the order, "All wings, prepare to vanish." It was the signal, the culmination of weeks of deception. Reeves and his squadron pulled back into the clouds, engines throttled down, hiding in the vapor. The German formations flew in perfect precision below, confident and unopposed. Their arrogance was the net, and Kellen was about to draw it tight. From a hidden bunker near the coast, Kellen watched their advance on a radar screen glowing faint green in the dim light. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. His aide, young and nervous, whispered, "Sir, if we wait too long, they'll reach London." Kellen's gaze didn't waver. "They won't reach it. They'll drown in their own confidence." He waited another minute, then leaned toward the radio. Now. The sky exploded. Dozens of RAF fighters burst from the cloud banks, diving out of the sun in blinding arcs. The first wave struck the bombers from above, tearing into their formation with ruthless precision. Reeves's guns roared, the vibration rattling through his bones. Tracer fire lanced through the sky, slicing engines and fuel lines. One bomber erupted in flames, then another. Black smoke bloomed like ink in water. "Break right, break right!" Reeves shouted as Messerschmitts descended to intercept. The air filled with chaos, shattered wings, burning fuel, the stench of cordite and oil. He saw a Spitfire collide with a German fighter, both disappearing in a single blossom of fire. 2-1, on your 6, came a voice. Reeves rolled hard left, bullets slicing past where his tail had been. He leveled out behind the attacker, lined up his sights, and squeezed the trigger. The Messerschmitt disintegrated, debris spinning past his canopy. Below, the bombers began to scatter, their formation collapsing. The Luftwaffe's commander, thousands of feet beneath the carnage, barked frantic orders to regroup. But the British squadron struck from every direction, Kellen's ghost wings living up to their legend. They appeared, killed, and vanished before the Germans could react. Inside the command bunker, Kellen's eyes never left the radar. His voice was calm, almost detached. "They're disoriented. Push the second line north. Cut off their retreat path over the channel." His aide hesitated. "Sir, that will trap our men too." Kellen didn't blink. "Then we all burn together." But they burn first. In the air, Reeves felt the shift. German fighters tried to pull back toward the sea, only to find another squadron rising to block their path. What had been an attack became a massacre. He saw a bomber spin out of control, its wings shearing off before it vanished into the gray. Another exploded so close the shockwave rattled his canopy. A voice screamed over the radio, then silence. Reeves didn't know whose it had been. He climbed higher, breaking through a layer of cloud into sudden sunlight. For a brief, impossible moment, the war fell away. The sky was clear, blue, endless. Then an explosion below shattered the illusion, the flames licking upward through the mist. He dived again, adrenaline pounding. A Messerschmitt lined up behind him. The tracers flashed, bullets grazing his fuselage. His instruments screamed warnings. He threw the plane into a roll, dove lower, lower, until the ocean filled his vision. The German followed. Reeves pulled up at the last second, the enemy too slow to react. The Messerschmitt slammed into the sea, vanishing in a column of spray. He climbed again, heart hammering. "Control, this is 2-1. Sector 3 cleared. Multiple losses, but we're holding. Static. Kellen, do you copy?" Still nothing. At the command post, the bunker shook. A near miss had torn half the roof away, showering dust over maps and equipment. Kellen stood in the chaos, barking orders as communications flickered. "Signal lines down. Get me an aerial link." "Sir, we've lost visual on half the squadrons." "They're not lost," Kellen snapped. "They're winning." A moment later, the radar operator shouted, "Enemy retreating, sir. They're breaking west." Kellen allowed himself a single, slow breath. "They've cracked." He turned to the field telephone. "Tell every pilot still breathing, pursue them to the edge of the sea." The operator hesitated. "Sir, their fuel." Kellen's expression hardened. "We finish this." Reeves heard the new order and didn't hesitate. He pushed his throttle forward, chasing the fleeing bombers toward the channel. The clouds tore apart, revealing sunlight glinting on the water below. Smoke trailed behind the retreating Germans like dying comets. He lined up another bomber, fired, and watched it fall in a spiraling blaze that ended in the sea's cold embrace. Then came the hit. The warning light flared red. A burst of enemy fire shredded his right wing. His engine sputtered, flames licking along the fuselage. The world tilted violently. Reeves wrestled with the controls, coughing as smoke filled the cockpit. 2-1 going down, he rasped into the radio. "Bailing out, South Sector." He pulled the canopy release and threw himself into the wind. The rush of air tore at him, cold and brutal. The parachute jerked open, slamming his body upward. Below, his plane exploded against a field, scattering debris like sparks. He landed hard in a ditch, rolling through mud and smoke. His limbs burned, but he was alive. Above, the battle raged on. The sky was a canvas of flame and vapor trails, the roar of engines echoing like thunder. Reeves staggered to his feet, searching the horizon. He could see the silhouettes of the remaining planes circling like hawks, hounding the retreating enemy toward the sea. In the distance, the sound of artillery joined the air war, a dull, rhythmic pounding. British anti-aircraft guns were firing from coastal batteries, finishing what the pilots had begun. Reeves sank to his knees, watching tracer shells streak upward. The Germans were trapped between sky and sea, nowhere left to run. Then he saw it, the command post, not far beyond the ridge, a plume of smoke rising where Kellen's position had been. He ran. The ground trembled beneath his boots. Each step felt heavier than the last. He crested the hill and saw the wreckage, craters, burning trucks, twisted metal. The command tent was gone. In its place, a pit of fire. "General," he shouted. Through the haze, a figure moved. Kellen stumbled out from the smoke, uniform torn, one leg dragging uselessly behind him. Blood streaked his face, but his eyes still burned with the same fierce clarity. Reeves rushed to him, slipping an arm under his shoulder. "Sir, you're hurt." Kellen's voice was a rasp. "Don't waste it. Look." Reeves turned. Out over the channel, the remnants of the Luftwaffe were fleeing, broken, scattered, burning. Their once mighty formation was gone. The sky that had belonged to them now belonged to silence. Kellen gave a faint, grim smile. "We did it." Reeves swallowed, throat tight. "At what cost?" The general's eyes softened. "All victory costs the same, Lieutenant. We just pay it later." A new explosion sounded nearby. Reeves pulled him toward the trench. Kellen didn't resist but looked up one last time at the clearing sky. "The war turns here," he murmured. "But don't mistake turning for ending." Reeves said nothing. He looked back at the horizon, fire fading, smoke thinning, the wreckage of men and machines drifting toward the sea. The wind carried the faint smell of oil and salt and death. Kellen closed his eyes. "Send the report. Tell them the Luftwaffe is finished." Reeves hesitated. "And you, sir?" The general's hand tightened weakly on his sleeve. "I'll see to the ghosts." Moments later, medics arrived. Reeves stepped back as they lifted Kellen onto a stretcher. The general's gaze found him once more, steady despite the pain. "You've done well, Reeves. Remember, madness is only what the fearful call vision." Then he was carried away, vanishing into the smoke. Reeves stood alone on the ridge as the last of the dogfights ended. The air was strangely quiet, save for the distant hiss of waves. In the wreckage below, the remains of fallen aircraft gleamed like broken wings scattered across the earth. He picked up a piece of twisted metal, a fragment of his own plane, still warm to the touch, and held it in his palm. The edges were sharp, but he didn't let go. Above him, the sky cleared completely for the first time in weeks. Blue, empty, infinite. It should have felt like peace, but it didn't. It felt like aftermath. Somewhere far off, he thought he heard the faint hum of returning engines, the surviving ghost wings heading home, if home still existed. Reeves turned toward the sound, his shadow stretching long across the cratered field. The battle was over, but the reckoning had only begun. The days after the great battle passed like smoke, thin, lingering, impossible to grasp. Reeves sat in the remnants of an airfield that no longer buzzed with life. The tarmac was cracked, littered with the carcasses of burned-out planes, their wings twisted like fallen birds. The air still smelled of oil and ash. Somewhere in the distance, a hangar door creaked in the wind. He hadn't flown since that day. The doctor said he could, that his wounds had healed, but something deeper hadn't. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the sky burning red again, saw Harris's plane spinning into the sea, saw Kellen's stretcher disappearing into the smoke. They said the Luftwaffe was finished. They said victory was theirs. But victory, he thought, didn't sound like silence. News traveled quickly in the shattered world. The Germans were retreating on all fronts. London was still standing. Churchill's voice had thundered across the airwaves, calling the defense of the skies a miracle. Reeves had stood among the crowd of mechanics and surviving pilots as they listened to that speech, but no one cheered. They only stared at the ground, haunted by the ghosts of those who didn't come back. When Kellen returned, weeks later, he was not the same man. His limp was worse, his frame thinner, but his eyes, those fierce, calculating eyes, still burned with purpose. He walked through the camp like a revenant, the soldiers whispering as he passed. Reeves watched him from the hangar door, unsure whether to salute or hide. "Lieutenant," Kellen said finally, stopping beside him. His voice was quieter now, but no less commanding. "You're still grounded?" "Yes, sir," Reeves replied. "Good," Kellen said. "Means you're still thinking." He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where a gray line of clouds gathered over the sea. "They'll rebuild, Reeves. Not today, not next week, but they will." The Luftwaffe wasn't just planes. It was belief. And belief doesn't die as easily as metal burns. Reeves frowned. "You think they'll come back?" Kellen didn't answer immediately. "I think the world never learns fast enough. We celebrate survival as though it's peace." He exhaled, slow and tired. But peace is only the pause between two wars. For a long while, neither man spoke. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the faint echo of distant artillery. Somewhere on the continent, another front was roaring to life. Reeves finally broke the silence. "What happens to us now, sir? To the ghost wings?" Kellen smiled faintly, but there was no triumph in it. "You've seen ghosts before, Lieutenant. What happens to them when their purpose is done?" Reeves thought of the empty bunks, the faces that had vanished, the sky littered with memories. "They fade," he said quietly. The general nodded. "Yes. But sometimes, before they fade, they leave warnings." That night, Reeves couldn't sleep. The camp was restless, men drinking or staring into the darkness, afraid of their own thoughts. He walked along the runway, past rows of damaged planes awaiting scrapping. The moon hung low, silver light glinting off shattered glass. He reached out, running a hand along the cold metal of his old Spitfire, rebuilt, repainted, but no longer his. It felt like touching a grave. A noise broke the stillness, the low hum of engines. Reeves looked up. In the distance, a formation of planes approached from the east, silhouettes against the moon. For a heartbeat, his chest clenched in panic. The Germans? Again? But then the recognition came, the roundels on the wings, the steady, familiar formation. RAF. Returning from another front. He watched as they descended, one by one, their landing lights piercing the dark. For a moment, the field came alive again, the roar of engines, shouts from the ground crew, the smell of fuel. But when the last plane touched down, Reeves saw it clearly, 3 empty spaces in the formation. 3 more ghosts. Kellen emerged from his quarters, limping toward the noise. His expression didn't change. "How many?" he asked the squadron leader. 20 went up, came the reply. 17 came back. Kellen nodded slowly. "Better than most." He looked up at the dark sky. "Still, the sky demands payment." Reeves couldn't hold it in anymore. "Sir, when does it stop? How many more have to?" Kellen's gaze silenced him. "As many as it takes." Then softer, almost to himself, "We win because we can bear what they cannot." The next morning, Kellen called for Reeves in his office, a small wooden hut lined with maps and reports. The general was hunched over a desk, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. "I'm being recalled to command," he said without looking up. "High Command wants to plan the next phase. They think the war is turning in our favor." Reeves said nothing. Kellen glanced at him. "You don't look convinced." "I just wonder," Reeves said, "how many turns it takes before we come full circle." The general gave a weary chuckle. "You're learning." He stubbed out the cigarette, then handed Reeves a small envelope. "This was meant for you. Harris wrote it before the Channel run." The postmaster found it among the recovered effects. Reeves took the envelope with trembling hands. The handwriting was unmistakable, careless, uneven, alive. He hesitated, then unfolded the letter. Reeves, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. Or maybe you didn't. Either way, I want to say something before we're both smoke in the wind. We flew because we had to, not because we loved it. Don't let anyone tell you war makes heroes. It only reveals who can survive the guilt. If you do make it, promise me one thing, don't become what it takes to win. Stay human. That's the real victory. Reeves's throat tightened. He folded the letter carefully, slipping it back into his pocket. Kellen watched him silently. What did he say? Reeves met his eyes. That victory means nothing if we stop being human. For the first time, Kellen's expression faltered. He looked away, out the window, where the dawn was breaking. Then perhaps, he murmured, I've already lost. Later that day, the orders came. Kellen was to leave for London. Reeves and the remnants of his squadron were reassigned to rest and reorganization. The war had shifted, the ghosts were being dismissed. As the convoy prepared to depart, Reeves stood at the edge of the runway watching Kellen climb into a staff car. The general paused, looking back one last time. Take care of the skies, Lieutenant, he said. Reeves gave a small, formal nod. And you, sir, take care of the ground. Kellen smiled faintly. The ground has never cared for anyone. The door shut, and the car drove off, dust rising behind it until it vanished into the gray horizon. When night came again, Reeves sat alone by the remains of a campfire. The airfield was nearly empty now, just a few silhouettes moving in the dim light. Somewhere, a radio crackled with news of Allied advances. The war was changing, they said. The tide had turned. He looked up at the stars, cold, distant, silent. The same stars he'd seen through the canopy in battle, when the world had been nothing but light and noise and death. Now they seemed indifferent. Eternal witnesses to men's brief madness. He took out Harris's letter again, reading it by the flicker of the fire. Each word felt heavier than before. Stay human. He whispered the phrase aloud, as though saying it might make it true. The next morning, Reeves received his own orders, temporary leave. For the first time in months, he boarded a train heading north, away from the front. The countryside slid past the window, green fields scarred by bomb craters, villages half rebuilt, children waving at the passing soldiers. It felt unreal, like a painting of a peace that hadn't yet been earned. When he reached his hometown, he found it quiet, almost untouched. His mother met him at the door, eyes wet, hands trembling. For the first time since the war began, Reeves felt something break open inside him. The weight of it all, the fire, the smoke, the ghosts, came crashing down. That night, as he lay in his old room, he dreamed of the sky again. But this time, there were no planes, no explosions. Only silence. The clouds drifted peacefully, the horizon endless. And there, standing on the edge of it all, he saw Kellen, still and watchful, his coat billowing in the wind. When Reeves woke, the dawn light spilled through the window, soft and pale. He sat up slowly, realizing something that had eluded him for months: the sky didn't belong to anyone. Not to nations, not to generals, not even to those who fought for it. It belonged to silence, to memory, to the ghosts who once filled it. A week later, he returned to the airfield one last time. The base was nearly abandoned now, the runways cracked with weeds. He walked to the end of the strip and looked out over the horizon where the sea met the sky. He closed his eyes, listening, not for engines, but for echoes. He thought of Harris's laughter, of Kellen's defiance, of every pilot who vanished into the clouds. They weren't gone. Not really. They had simply become part of the endless blue above. When the wind rose, it carried a faint, familiar sound, the ghostly hum of engines long silenced. Reeves smiled faintly. "Rest easy, boys," he whispered. "We held the sky. Then he turned and walked away, the sunlight warming his back, the war behind him at last. The ghosts remained, watching, waiting. And far above, in the quiet heavens that had once burned red, the echoes of victory drifted like ash into eternity.